There's no buyer's remorse, I hope, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, your 2023 ride or die for the fantasy season.
No, I feel better about it because just talking to a bunch of people who absolutely love the pick, who agree, I've talked to people around the NFL who just tell me what a great kid Amon-Ra St. Brown is. We know about the production on the field, but everything I hear about him just as a person, as a player, as a professional, really exciting. Look, the fact is around the ride or die, it's not about, hey, this is some obscure guy that I think is going to launch himself. I mean, listen, everyone knew who Jalen Hurts was last year. It is about me planting a flag saying this is the guy I believe in the most this year. This is the guy that I'm going to draft higher than consensus, that I'm going to try to get on every single team that I draft this year. This is my guy that I think takes a next step. But it's obviously a known quantity as we think about, like, I think, Connor, your suggestion was Bijan Robinson. Jay, your suggestion was Justin Herbert. Both great suggestions. Both were on the list. But ultimately for me, I went with Amon-Ra St. Brown. You heard me talking with Chris Sims there in terms of the fact that since week 13 of 2021, he's second in the NFL in receptions among wide receivers. Only Jefferson has more. In terms of total fantasy points, only Jefferson and Devontae Adams have more. Think about that. Since week 13 of 2021, as we sit here in the preseason of 2023, only Adams and Jefferson have more fantasy points. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the third best wide receiver in fantasy, better than Tyreek Hill, better than Stephon Diggs, and no one talks about him as a top 3 guy. I have him at wide receiver 6. I'm at 10 overall, and again, I am higher than consensus. So I just think people don't appreciate how good this guy has been, and what we didn't see in the clip there is what I will tell you is, among other things, obviously massive targets available. No T.J. Hawkinson, Jameson Williams suspended for 6 games. Yes, Jahmyr Gibbs will be involved in the passing game. Yes, they signed Marvin Jones to return to the Lions, but come on, this passing offense will go through the sun god. And look at the schedule for the Lions coming up. Over the second half of the year, 7 of the final 8 games that the Lions play are either in domes or they have one game at Dallas, which is a retractable stadium. It's December 30th. They're probably going to close the roof. So in essence, 7 of their final 8 games are in domes, and we know how well Jared Goff plays in domes. Like, he's a ridiculously good quarterback in a dome. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to have a monster year. He is my fantasy ride or die.
Yeah, Matthew, I thought you were actually going to go Equanimous St. Brown, but it's good you pivoted last moment to the Shora St. Brown. I was going to go full heel and wear a L'Jarius Sneed jersey, who's going to be shadowing Amon-Ra in week 1, but we didn't have one.
It didn't ship in time.
Yeah, the Willie Sneed jersey is missing as well. I really like the point about the schedule. I think it's the 9 of their last 10 games are basically going to be in stadiums that have a retractable roof or are a dome outside. And the one other game is at Chicago, who have got one of the worst secondaries in the league anyway. So I think it's a really good play. Not a super obvious one either. So I think you've hit the sweet spot there. And I mean, the stuff with Jared Goff outside in cold weather, that's a real thing. Like, his splits between playing indoors and outdoors are significant. And so just being able to write that off the second half of the season and just avoid the cold at all, I think is huge. So yeah, Amon-Ra should have a massive season.
And I think an underlying factor of it all is a couple teams wanted to hire away their offensive coordinator, the young Ben Johnson, this offseason. They have continuity with one of the more underrated, brighter offensive minds in the league. So you have the number 1 wide receiver, where the target share, is Barry highlighted, as massive, good play calling, favorable schedule that aids the quarterback as well. And outside of Jahmyr Gibbs, there's not really a lot of guys that come into that offense where you worry so much about the usage of them too.
Yep, absolutely. And just rock solid offensive line. You know, Jared Goff is not someone you feel great about taking you to a Super Bowl, but you feel great about him putting up fantasy points in the regular season for you. He was a revelation last year, a revelation in terms of competence achieved. So I think that, yeah, a lot of stuff is lining up for Amon-Ra to have a great season.
Barry, who gave him the biggest run? Who was the one guy that maybe it came down to the wire or the day of, you're like, man, this is a good runner-up, but I have to go with Amon-Ra?
Listen, no, it was Amon-Ra was always sort of the clubhouse leader, if you will. I did seriously consider Justin Herbert. Jay, I think you make a great point. And I think, look, if you read my 100 Facts column, which is up now on NBCSports.com, rotoworld.com, it's 100% free. It's been updated since it was in the magazine as well. you sort of get a sense of who I like and who I don't, right? Because that column is kind of a semi-cleverly disguised sleepers and bust column. I kind of tried to, the point of that column is for me to use facts, cherry-picked stats, which I fully admit in the open. I fully admit that they're cherry-picked stats, and I use them to try to lead you to a certain conclusion. And you can sort of tell, like, I'm in on Justin Herbert this year. I'm in on Lamar Jackson this year, who was on the list. Anthony Richardson, who I believe Denny Carter suggested, he was on the list. So there were a couple of quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence was on the list at one point. So those quarterbacks were on the list. Among wide receivers, I thought about both Amon-Ra and Cris Olave. He was on the list. And among running backs, I did consider Bijan. I was worried he's just a little bit too obvious for me, Connor, because just everyone's so excited about Bijan, but I agree he's just going to have an absolute beast of a year. Jahmyr Gibbs was on the list as well among running backs. So, listen, a lot of consideration went into it. And I did like, who was it? Was it Kyle Dvorak who suggested Isaiah Pacheco, or was it Roto-Pat? No, Kyle suggested Tony Pollard. Kyle suggested Tony Pollard.
Tutters.
Both of guys, Pollard and Pacheco were also on the initial list.
Yeah, I will say as well, the sneaky element to this, you can get a lot of content out of the Sun God. I would say that if the Sun God's wide receiver 1 after week 5, then Matthew Berry is very short odds to be dressed like a solar deity, something wearing the kind of, the hat and everything. So, yeah, there's a lot of good angles to this one.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.